I think the most evolved perspective on training and nutrition is we figure out some type of way to add back all of the things that we're missing, right? Like the grounding, like we used to be grounded all the time. We used to breathe good air, right? It's finding technological ways to add those things back, right? Like you get a home air filter system to clean your air so you're breathing good air. Maybe you sleep on a Magnetico sleep pad or something, so you're getting some of the Earth's magnetic field back. Maybe you're viewing the sun every morning, and then you're cutting blue light up at night and you have like the red lights on or something. I think that those are ways that we can sort of like return back to some of our roots in a sense. But then I think the ultimate perspective isn't just to return back to the way that things were, because I think there's also limitations in that. People got sick, right? Modern medicine has done when penicillin came around, right? That was magic for people that, were getting these infections, right? People died of the plague, and they were grounded all the time, right?
Yeah.
And so I think this idea that like, when people over romanticize some of these ideas about our ancestors, they're ignoring the fact that there were a lot of really shitty things that went on as well, right? And so I think the evolved perspective is, yes, let's add back in all of these things that were good, that did these things for us that now we're lacking in, right? Like, I'm almost positive there are certain diseases that are related to EMF exposure, right? I mean, that's something that we don't have a lot of conclusive evidence on, but it's starting to look that way, right? And so we can add back things that sort of help our bodies adapt to these new stressors that we have, but then we can intelligently integrate that with things like modern medicine, right? And things like targeted supplementation, things like biohacks that, again, that's another polarized thing where you have a lot of people in the ancestral community that are like, fuck biohacks. You don't need any of that. You just need to get grounded. And it's like, need is a very interesting word, because I just like to look at like what's useful. I don't like to tell people what they need. I just say this could be useful for you given this, right? And so it's like, it's kind of difficult to return to nature when you work a 9 to 5 and you're under fluorescent lights, right? You got to do these things to kind of mitigate the damage, right? Because our bodies are very adaptable. We just haven't hyper novelty, all of these hyper novel things like AI and technology and blue light and all of these things, I think can really negatively influence our health, not because our body can't adapt to them at some point in time, but because we don't have things are changing too fast in our environment for our bodies to adapt, right? And so we need some of these things to kind of mitigate that damage, to kind of smooth that damage out. And so that's biohacks, that's wearing blue light blocking, that's all these things that people make fun of, right? Yeah. So there's that perspective. And then I think the ultimate standpoint is to say, maybe now, like with new laws and new regulations, I mean, it's going to definitely be there's a lot of change that needs to happen, right? For us to I think the world has to get really, really bad before like lawmakers and things begin to start saying, well, we're going to put regulations on like EMF exposure and like certain health hazards and whatnot. But I think that, that's the ultimate like evolved perspective, is through our own choices and our own habits and through, laws that get changed over the course of years, is that we can return back to some of those things that we did in the past that were really good for us, right? Like, you could have regulations where, instead of blue lights in the house, right, you have like a different type of bulb that like is the standard now, where it's not emitting a ton of blue light, but the light is maybe closer to like full UV or full, sun exposure, basically. It's closer to those spectrums, right? You could have all of these different things that I think could move the needle for people kind of back towards, the habits that the habits and the lifestyle that we would have had 100, 200 years ago. And then you can start also solving these problems that can be solved by those things, right? Because back in the day, people got sick. There were all of these problems that people had that were that are not going to be solved by diet, grounding, and, taking essential oils, right?
I mean, look at like Civil War, right? Most people died of infection, not from actual gunshots or anything like that. Like, just tell
exactly.
them to go ground their half of their arm in the dirt. Like, that'll work.
Yeah, and I even think you could apply that to fitness too, where you could say, yes, we have lives now where we're not sitting all day. We're able to like work better jobs, or we're able to do better things where we can get up and we can move, and we can integrate fitness with things that we also enjoy. But then I think we can also have the perspective that, like maybe we can go into the gym and we can do certain forms of strength training that optimize our bodies for specific things in ways that we still wouldn't have gotten in nature, right? Because that's the great thing about things like physical therapy is like, I'm almost positive that people 2, 3, 4, 1,000 years ago, however far back you want to go, had pain from musculoskeletal injuries. I have no doubt. I have no doubt that they got fucked up, chasing somebody or fighting somebody or hunting or whatever it was that they were doing. I think the difference between the pain that they probably had and the pain that we have now is most people have chronic pain from doing things that are very repetitive. They probably had like legitimate injuries and things to their bodies. And so that's where I think you can take some of these perspectives and say, we don't need to throw away modern fitness and modern nutrition and modern medicine. We can take all of these things, and now that we're sort of back at baseline, this is like our upgrade, right? It's like, just think of everything that we were doing prior to the modern world as like just baseline. It wasn't good, it wasn't bad. It was the way things worked. People died, we didn't have certain diseases back then because of certain things, but we also don't have certain diseases now that we had back then because of modern medicine. And so I think you can take that as the baseline and say, now let's just upgrade the human being, right? We have the baseline, we have the foundation in check. Now let's solve all of these problems that we never would have been able to solve 200-300 years ago because we didn't have the technology.
All right, if you enjoyed that clip, make sure to click up here to check out the full episode. Till next time, guys, be good.